We define creation.
Duane Gish is Vice President of the Institute for Creation Research and a Chief Spokesman. He holds a doctorate in biochemistry from the University of California, Berkeley. He has fashioned an entire career out of debating evolutionists, and he is much in demand by audiences of biblical literalists.
What is scientific creationism?
Scientific creationism is the body of evidence that supports the concept of direct spatial creation. There's no reference to any religious literature of any kind in this. It's strictly an examination of the fossil record, the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of probability as they apply to the origin of life, genetics, biology, geology, and other fields of science. All of the evidence that can be brought to bear on this question of origins.
Although there may be disagreement about the details, most scientists, who are evolutionists, of course, contend that evolution is the most satisfactory theory for understanding human origins. Why do you dissent from that view?
I dissent from that view, first of all, because other aspects of the fossil record, I believe, demonstrate beyond doubt that evolution has not taken place on this planet. We have absolutely no ancestors for the complex invertebrates. We have absolutely no ancestors for the fishes. Obviously, under evolutionary theory, they were our ancestors, but they didn't have any ancestors, you see. I think that falsifies the very notion of evolution.
But scientists who have also examined the fossil record insist that there are thousands of intermediate life forms. Is this a case that simply of two different groups looking at the same evidence and drawing different conclusions?
They have actually a very few examples of what they maintain possibly could be intermediate forms. And not even all evolutionists agree on these things. Why, if evolution is true, we should have just thousands and thousands and thousands of undoubted transitional forms. I mean, something partway between a fin and a foot, something intermediate between a scale and a feather, or a forelimb and a wing of a bird, something like that. Any individual, you wouldn't need any schooling, any education to see these obvious transitional forms. They have nothing like that. They do not have the transitional forms between the major kinds. They know that they have not found what Darwin said they should have found. That is why they've come up with these alternative theories of evolution today. Sort of a herky-jerky idea of evolution, or in the case of others suggest a hopeful monster mechanism, this idea of punctuated equilibrium or herky-jerky evolution. That would never have been suggested if they had the transitional form. Now, when it comes to human origins, I think we have to remember the very sorry record of evolutionists in this field. Nebraska man was touted for several years as a human ancestor, turned out to be a pig's tooth. Piltdown man, for nearly a half a century, the world's greatest authorities, that is the consensus of the world's greatest authorities, Piltdown man was our subhuman ancestor.
But it was the scientists.
Just a fake.
But it was the scientists that eventually showed that these were not legitimate.
Yes, certainly, but why did it take them a half a century? Why did those experts see ape-like features in a human skull? Why could they see human-like features in a modern ape's jaw, in the case of Piltdown man? Because they wanted to see it. They expected to see it.
But scientists level that same charge at you. You see out there what you want to see.
I would agree that all of us, I think in the area of origins, begin with a bias.
Evolutionists who are geologists or archaeologists, paleontologists, and so forth, are constantly doing research all around the world. Are you doing similar sorts of research? And what sort of results are you getting?
Yes, we are doing some similar research. Now remember this, we don't get one penny of tax money. The professors at university, most of them have grants in the hundreds of thousands, in many cases millions of dollars, yearly, while we have no grants whatsoever. And our research must be totally funded by our private funds. So we do a limited amount of research. We have a limited staff. But, for example, Dr. Austin, our geologist, is taking samples of rocks from various levels of the Grand Canyon.
Earlier today, when I was conducting a tour, or having a tour of this museum, the docent told me that the Grand Canyon was formed in a matter of weeks or months. Doesn't that strain credibility?
Well, I tell you, ordinarily with any geological training that you get, yes, it certainly would. But yet at Mount St. Helens, there's a canyon that's 600 feet wide, 150 feet deep, with a river going down through that canyon. Now you look at that canyon, and you say it must have taken hundreds of or millions of years to form the Grand Canyon, It must have taken at least hundreds of thousands of years, maybe a few million years to cut this canyon. That canyon formed in a matter of hours as a result of a mudslide, one of the subsequent earthquakes and eruptions there at Mount St. Helens that came down, that mudslide came down through that area, would have been covered by, oh, I don't know, 100, 200 feet of material from the volcano, came down through there and cut that canyon. I mean, in just a matter of hours.
But is there any evidence of volcanic activity near the Grand Canyon?
Well, it wouldn't be volcanic activity to cut the canyon. Supposing that you had a natural dam formed by debris up to the northeast part of the country, damming up a huge amount of water, that suddenly collapsed, and that water came down through that area. While that material was fairly unconsolidated, it would cut that canyon in a very short time.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, there's an example just recently in scientific literature from American geologists working with Russian geologists in Siberia. They estimate there was a flood there 1,500 feet deep that came rushing down through there and cut those formations. 1,500 feet deep. They possibly an ice dam had dammed up that huge body of water. Now, you see, if something like that happened down in that area, it could have formed very, very rapidly.
Okay, but it's one thing to suppose that, but is there any evidence that that happened?
Well, empirical evidence of the, no, this is in Siberia. And the scablands in Washington.
Now, we're talking about the Grand Canyon.
I know it. Well, there's none there in the scablands. There's none there in Siberia of any dam. No, you couldn't. This is a postulate. I mean, when you're trying to reconstruct Earth history, you're trying to explain events that took place in the past. You weren't there. You didn't see it. Much of the evidence is gone, long ago been eroded away. You're merely trying to reconstruct what might have happened. So that's all we can do, postulate alternatives that might explain evidence that would fit into a different sort of a model.
What's at stake here in the evolution-creation debate? Why have you invested such energy and passions into this issue?
Look what's happened in this country in the last 50 years. When I was a child, I didn't know anybody who used drugs. I never even heard of such a thing. Today we have a rampant drug culture that is literally destroying the minds, the bodies, and the very souls of millions of people, and it results in murders of thousands and thousands of people. We have an AIDS plague that's going to kill literally hundreds of millions of people here in the world. We have violence and crime on an unprecedented scale. We have teachers that are not even safe in their schools any longer. Now, I know a lot of evolutionists won't agree with me, but I believe that the major reason that these things have happened is that our judges and our educators and our legislators, the leaders in our society, have been indoctrinated in evolution theory. I think they've literally been brainwashed in this theory. They've accepted that philosophy that goes along with the theory. And I think that's a philosophy, unfortunately, which governs our society today. Now, as Christians, we find this to be very unfortunate. We feel it's very wrong. We feel that we know in our heart there is a creator who created the universe. Now, if he created the universe, he's the Lord and Master of what he has created. There must be some relationship between the created and the creator, and God must control our destiny. I think that makes a very great difference, or certainly, let's put it this way, it should make a very great difference in the lives of anyone who realizes that, you see. And I think if we go back to that, we'd have a much better society than what we have today.
Dr. Duane Gish, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Randall.
By any reckoning, the Grand Canyon is a majestic sight, the Colorado River having whittled away at the rock walls over time, exposing layer upon layer of spectacular color. But just how much time? In order to interpret the Genesis account of six-day creation literally, many creationists believe in a young Earth. They insist, therefore, that this canyon was formed in a matter of weeks, perhaps months. The scientific consensus, on the other hand, is that this process took millions and millions of years. Layers of sedimentary rocks are the time capsules of Earth's history. The bottom layers are the oldest, the topmost the youngest. Each tells a story about events that occurred at the time of its formation. In Charles Darwin's day, scientists observed that the lower layers of rock have fewer and fewer fossils of species that are still alive. And in the very oldest layers, they found only simpler creatures, the invertebrates. Based on these observations, some scientists before Darwin had considered evolution, but they had no theory for how it could have occurred. Darwin came up with his theory aboard the HMS Beagle, sent to chart the coast of South America. On the coast of Argentina, for example, he found fossil remains of an extinct type of armadillo, buried deep beneath the habitat of living armadillos. On the Galapagos Islands, off the coast of Ecuador, he observed several species of finches, each with beaks and other features that suited it for food gathering and protection from predators. Darwin had observed that cultivating plants and breeding animals could cause them to change rapidly. He theorized that, given lots of time, similar changes could occur naturally. As with the finches, these changes would be those that helped the species adapt to its environment and survive. In 1859, Darwin published The Origin of Species. Its complete title is The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Discoveries since Darwin have reinforced the scientific consensus that evolution indeed occurred. The atomic age brought new techniques for dating the Earth, based on the radioactive decay in rocks. These methods point to an Earth over 4 billion years old. Fossils of shelled animals first appear in great numbers in rock dated 600 million years old, followed by fish, amphibians, reptiles, including dinosaurs, mammals, and birds. Scientists continue to fill in gaps in the fossil record. And in the 1940s, DNA was conclusively demonstrated to be the common genetic building block of all organisms. Today, most scientists think that much of evolution takes place by means of a process called punctuated equilibrium. Species remain unchanged for long periods of time, followed by bursts of change called punctuations. These punctuations might take place over thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, which is still a blink of an eye in geological time.